Okay, sounds good. All right. Well, I'm sure a couple people will come in. For people who do not know me, and I am relatively new here, my name is Sarah Romsberg. I have been an agent, a realtor for about 8 years, 7 years now. And I just joined Lantern back in September, and I am at the Mooresville office. So we were just chatting about the Mooresville office, getting it going, and we have a couple new agents over there. So it's an exciting time in Mooresville. We're going to get more of a presence for Lantern in that area. But that is just a little bit about me. Um, I will go ahead and tell you, before I was a realtor, I was a teacher, and I was an ESL teacher. And so I talk with my hands more than normal people. And I never realized that until I watched myself on video. But I'll be doing this and doing this, and and I just get so embarrassed. But some of those things just come out from time to time. So ignore my crazy hands. Um, they might they might start going in this Zoom call, but just ignore the hands. So, and again, I don't, it's very bright in my house right now. I hope you can see me okay. It's very bright in here. And another thing before we get started, this class will definitely not last 2 hours. I saw that it was 10 to 12, and that is a lot. That's a lot for an online class. I know in person could we could talk back and forth and 2 hours probably, but online that might be a little bit of a stretch. So I'm going to try to keep it around the hour mark. I know everyone is busy, and I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Hopefully you'll be able to walk away with some information that will help you in the future with your listings. All right, so a couple more people are jumping on. And again, I mentioned I am not the most technologically savvy person, so I know you have the option to type in questions as I'm speaking. I can't promise you that I am with it enough to read a question while I'm doing the PowerPoint and the Zoom, but we'll take little breaks. And if you have a question, go ahead and type it and send it. But it'll probably be when we stop for a little break before I actually read that question and answer it back. But I know sometimes it's easier to send something when you're thinking about it. So feel free to go ahead and ask a question if need be, and we will get to it. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. And I'm going to share my screen with you. All right. And let's see, here we go. There, share my screen again. There. So we are going to talk today about pricing, and something that I know can be very intimidating to agents, especially agents that are just starting out. Listings in general can be intimidating, but when you have to actually price a property, price it correctly so that it will sell quickly, your sellers will be happy. There are lots of factors that come into place. There are also lots of resources available to us naturally through the Canopy MLS system that I think a lot of people do not know about and do not take advantage of when it comes to pricing and CMAs. So part of the class today is I'm just going to show you some of the resources that are available to you. I'm not going to say free, because you pay for those resources when you pay your MLS and Canopy dues, but they are there and they are very helpful when it comes to pricing properties. So to begin with, let's just start it. Obviously, a seller wants the most money possible for their home when you are selling your home for them. So usually sellers have plans for the equity in their home. They are either going to take that money and turn it around and put it in a new house that they are planning on purchasing, or maybe they are taking that money to pay off debt. Maybe that is their retirement plan. A lot of people live in a home for 20, 30 years, they pay it off and they plan on selling their home, taking that equity, and that kind of jump starts the next phase of their life. So sellers have big plans for the equity, and we need to understand that for a lot of people, it's the most money that they have. The equity in the home is, for a lot of people, their only savings. Some people have different savings accounts and stock markets and IRAs and all of that, but some people have all of their savings tied up in real estate. And so we need to be mindful of that, and mindful of the reason why getting them the most money for their home is very important. We also want to price correctly. A reason it's important is because we want to attract qualified buyers for the home. So when you price a home correctly, not underprice or overprice the home, you are attracting in buyers that are going to be the most qualified to buy that house. Our goal when we work with a listing is to get the most money for our sellers, but we also want to make sure the buyers on the other end of the transaction will follow through and close on the property, and that they are actually qualified, and won't, have to back out at any point. So we need to be mindful of that. Another reason why pricing is important is because we help shape the trends of real estate in our market. Prices, market value is very dynamic. So that means it doesn't stay the same, it changes. And we are the ones who kind of help shape the trends and the patterns in real estate. So, if a bunch of people were just underpricing homes to get them sold quickly, that is going to depreciate the market in that area. That is going to make other people's homes not be as valued. So it's our responsibility to the communities that we serve, to the people that we serve, to make sure that we are shaping the real estate market correctly. And again, we can only do so much with that, but it is our responsibility to be knowledgeable of the market and to make sure that when we are pricing our properties, we are keeping in all of those things in mind.
And she's trying to get there so close today. I said, but I just want to let you know in case,
let me unshare my screen for just a second. And again, y'all are being to keep me. Let me go back to Zoom. Okay, there we are. So before we move on to the next slide, does anyone have any questions or things that they want to walk away from this class with more knowledge on? So obviously I just introduced kind of what we are going to do, but before we get really started, I want to make sure that there are not any things that you must know when you leave, or any questions that you have. I want to make sure that I answer those questions for you if you do have some of those questions. You can either type that or you can unmute yourself and ask any questions before we get started. All right, well, let's keep on going then. So I'm going to share my screen again. So we talked about why pricing is so important. At the bottom of every screen, you are going to see this in my PowerPoint. It says, remember, you are the expert on the market. That is why your sellers called you. Make sure you act like the expert and do your research before talking about pricing. This is at the bottom of every one of my PowerPoint slides because I really do fully believe this. You are the expert. You need to know that, but you also need to treat yourself like the expert. So you need to make sure before you talk price, even one time, you have knowledge. The thing about our clients, both buyers and sellers, I'm sure you have found out, is that they do not forget anything we say. Anything we say, they take everything we say and they take it to the bank. So you cannot casually make comments about price per square foot or days on market or average sales price unless you know those things for the area that your seller is in. They remember everything we say. So part of this and part of the things we're going to talk about are ways to make sure you are the expert so that our sellers fully trust us. The next part is, like I mentioned, there are tons of resources that will help you with pricing. So just some examples on the screen. Tax records are not a great place to go to help you with pricing. Tax records are a good place to go to see, you know, the history of the home, acreage for the most part. Most of the time they're correct with the number of bedrooms and bathrooms and things like that. Tax records are not really accurate when it comes to square footage a lot of the time. But tax records are a great place to start, just to get a picture of the home, especially if it's a home you are not familiar with. I'm sure we have all, not we have all, but maybe we have sold, some of us have sold a house, listed a house and sold a house that we helped those buyers buy. Number one, that's a great feeling when you do that. But in that case, you are more familiar with the home. If it is a listing that you just happened upon, or it was referral or a first time listing with these clients, you may not have a lot of knowledge on that home before you go there. Tax records are a good place to start. Another resource is to see if the home has ever sold before. If you go to MLS and type in the address and go to closed, make sure you get rid of the 0 to 180 days, but you can see when it last closed, how many times the house has sold. That's a good place just to go and get information before you start the path of pricing also. Sometimes it will have never sold before. Sometimes it's, you know, a new construction home that had never sold previously, or it sold for sale by owner and not on the MLS. So it's not always going to be there, but that is a good place to go and get information. Comps, this is a biggie. So on Canopy MLS, you are going to go and search for active homes, under contract homes, and recent past sales. Recent past sales to me depend on the home itself. If it's in a neighborhood, I like to stick between 6 months. So 6 months of past sales. If it is a house that is more rural and does not have a ton of houses close to it, or it's a little bit unique, sometimes you have to bump that time period out. So for instance, this past year in January, I purchased a new home. The home that I live in is an old ranch, 1970s ranch, kind of in the middle of nowhere. There had not been a home that closed anywhere close to my home in the past like 4 years. So when I say you have to know your home and know the area, you know, I could not find comps for my house that had closed within the past 6 months. That there was nothing available. So you kind of have to go case by case. But if you can get homes that have closed in the past 6 months, that is best practice. So you want to pull some of those homes on the MLS and see a few things. You want to see their condition, obviously their square footage, bedroom, bathroom count, and you want to find homes that are as close as to your listing as possible. You want to make sure that you look at original list price. and closed price. You also want to see if there were any seller contributions. So were there any seller paid closing cost that happened as part of that transaction? All of those things are data that you want to know when it comes to pricing your listing. Something that I always ask my sellers for is if they have had an appraisal, or if they have a copy of the appraisal from when they purchased their home. If you purchased your home with the help of a lender, you had to get an appraisal at some point. So some clients still have a copy of that appraisal from when they purchased their home. Other clients, in the course of them owning that home, have gotten a home equity line, or they have refinanced. When they do those two things, they also have an appraisal done. If they have a copy of any appraisal, I always ask for it. An appraisal is not going to dictate necessarily the price that I suggest, but an appraisal tells me a lot of things. The biggest thing that an appraisal tells me is the accurate square footage number. So I'm going to touch on that again in a minute, but tax record square footage, we cannot go off of. It is wrong. Tax record square footage is notoriously wrong. And part of making sure that we get our sellers the most money for their property is to know the accurate square footage. So an appraisal usually has the accurate square footage, and unless they had done any additions to their home, that number is going to be more accurate than the tax record number. I also like to go off SAM data. And with me saying that, let me stop and show you what SAM data is. This is one of the resources
Hey guys, it looks like we lost her. We'll wait for her to come right back. Oh, there she is. Make it back, Sarah?
I'm at.
There you
I'm
are.
sorry. I do not know what happened. It would probably be best for me to stay logged into this class. So I apologize for that. Let me, I don't know where I cut off, but I was talking about
Hey, Sarah. Sarah.
And so what me? Yes, ma'am.
You are cutting out real bad right now for some reason. I'm sorry. Do you have your phone also on your Wi-Fi?
I do not. I do not. Is that better?
Yep.
Am I better now?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm plugged into my Ethernet. So hopefully, let's see. Hopefully we'll be better now.
I just made you host again.
About that.
You have the authority now.
Okay, thank you. So let me show you the SAM data that I am talking about. When you do Matrix and log in, down on the right-hand side, you are going to see something called Statistical Analysis Module. This is one of the resources that a lot of people use, and a lot of people do not know that it exists. So I'm going to click on this and show you what I mean by SAM data. I use this all the time. And this helps me with pricing. It helps me with buyers when we're thinking about looking in a particular neighborhood. I can pull the SAM data on a neighborhood, and it helps me with that. So let me show you what I mean. This will give me numbers based on various different topics: price per square foot, days on market, list to close time, the percentage of original price that a home sold for. So up here in the left-hand corner, I can search by various different things. I can search the entire MLS, so our whole canopy in an MLS system. I can also search by city, neighborhood, a condo complex, a county, a zip code, and a subdivision. And so zip code is important. You know, I don't know so much about Cabarrus County or Rowan County, but in Iredell County and Mooresville specifically, there are 2 zip codes. And 28115 Mooresville has a much lower price per square foot number than 28117 Mooresville. 28117 is primarily the kind of southwest part of Mooresville around the lake. And 28115 is more rural, you know, a little bit more out in the country. So in my market, my target market, zip code, there's a big difference. If I wanted to search just Mooresville, my data might be skewed versus if I wanted to search 28115 or 28117. Let me show you though for subdivision, because this is my favorite one. So I'm going to click subdivision. And all of the examples I'm going to show you today are a listing that I have coming up. So I had already done a lot of this data. So the neighborhood is called Oaks on Main in Mooresville. So that is the particular subdivision of the house that I am working on right now. In Oaks on Main, I can come down here and see right now the average sales price is $310,500 right here in January 2020. I can look back and see December 2020, go month by month and see the difference in average sales price for that particular neighborhood. I can also see price per square foot. So in Oaks on Main, the house that I'm looking at, the price per square foot average is 98. If I go back to January 2020, so 1 year ago, I can see that the average price per square foot in that neighborhood was 90. So you can kind of see the difference. Another one that I really like is days on market. So I click down here on days on market. The average days on market in this neighborhood is 8. You can come back and see, you know, in April 2020, it was 53. You know, April 2020 is right when all the craziness was getting started and things were uncertain. So it was 53. Right now, it is at 8. This data is just so good to show your sellers and kind of create an expectation of what the market looks like for their particular home. Like I mentioned, I also use this for buyers. If I know a buyer is looking, let's say I have a buyer who is looking only in Oaks on Main subdivision. I could go to these SAM reports and show them the percentage of original price that a home closes at right now is 99.1%. So if a home is listed at $300,000 and a buyer wants me to offer $270,000, I, instead of just saying, "You're wasting my time," I am going to do that politely. And I'm going to find data like this to show them right now a seller is getting 99.1% of their asking price. So coming in with a lowball offer in this neighborhood at this time is not going to work. And when you lead with data, I've found that you, first of all, are not offensive, but secondly, you don't have much of a, as combative from your clients because they see, it's hard to argue with data. So this SAM report, like I mentioned, is a great tool when you think about pricing a home. It also shows per listing. So, when you have a listing in that neighborhood right now, it is shown an average of 7.9 times before it goes under contract. So all of this data is super helpful to set clear expectations for your clients. You can also focus it down. So in Oaks on Main, this is all the bedrooms. But if my client, they have a 5-bedroom home. So if I just want to focus on 5-bedroom homes, resale, not new construction, you can set the parameters of what you want your data to show. Sometimes you have to back it out a little bit. Like this one, there might not be a ton of 5-bedroom homes that have sold in that market, but you can back it out a little bit to make sure it covers what you are looking for. I like to do this for counties also, just to see the different price per square foot in county. So again, I am in Iredell County, which I'll show you right now. The average price per square foot in all of Iredell County is 131. I know that several of you are in Cabarrus County. So let's look at that average price per square foot. In Cabarrus County, it's 122. Rowan County generally has a smaller number price per square foot wise, but it's at 100. So again, these are numbers that I like to look at least once a month. For all the counties that I serve, I like to know the average price per square foot for that county. People want to talk about real estate, and when you can lead with accurate information, it makes you look like an expert, which is my favorite word. But it also just shows that you are not stagnant in the real estate industry. You don't just know things when you have to, you stay on top of it. And this is such an easy tool for you to be able to do that. Okay, so that's SAM data. Now, let me go back to my PowerPoint. One of my other favorite tools, this is going to be next on the list. I'll go ahead and continue talking about it. One of my next favorite tools that is free to us, again, not free, you pay for it, but provided through Canopy, is called RPR. And that's what I'm going to show you next. It's called a Realtor's Property Resource. The RPR is through Canopy. Actually, let's just go back to it. We don't need to see the PowerPoint. So back on Matrix on the home page, I scroll down on the same section and I see Realtors Property Resource. I'm going to click on that. And this is a link that a lot of people also know it is there, but it's a phenomenal resource when we think about pricing a home. So basically, this is a detailed comparative analysis report. You know, Matrix, that you can do a quick CMA or a detailed CMA, but I have found that the Matrix one is not very user-friendly, in my opinion. This one, the RPR, is much more user-friendly. So I am going to type in the address. Oh, it's going to make me re-sign back in. You should automatically be logged in when you click through your Matrix to that RPR link. It will automatically log you in. I am going to type in that address that I just mentioned in Oaks on Main. And when you type in your address, you're going to press the search. So then it will pull up information about that house. Right now, it says the value, the estimated value it gives me for this property is $331,000, or $331,320. So this also gives me a range, kind of like the comp report in Matrix. It gives me a range 308 to 354. The confidence score on this one is 5-star. So that tells me the more stars, the better on this. 5-star tells me this home is in a neighborhood. There are lots of comps. There are lots of houses that have sold like this house. I am very confident. This valuation, whatever this valuation company or statistical analysis company is very secure in their valuation of 331, 320. It still gives me a range because like any property, there are going to be things, variables that change the value. We're going to talk about that in just a minute, but I wanted to show you this resource. So it gives me this short little version that I can see. This was a new construction home that it was built, I think, in 2014 or 2015. So the previous picture is just showing me the before it was born, before it was built. But now there is a home there. From this, I can go up here to create a report. And the create a report option gives me several different options. I can create a property report, a seller's report, a flyer, a mini property report, lots and lots of different things. I'm going to show you what the property report looks like. I have downloaded it and I want to show you the property report because this is an awesome thing to give to your sellers to show them where that value is coming from. So I downloaded the property report. You can see it's got my information on the front. It's got a map of the neighborhood and shows where their house is right here. It has the current estimated value, and then it breaks down the information about the house. Basically, this is from tax records. If you continue down, you can see some of the other information like school. If you keep scrolling down, you can see comps for this property, property history. It says the owner information in there also, but then again, it starts breaking down some of the trends over the past few months of this neighborhood. If you have sellers that love data, this is an excellent thing to give them. It shows them tons and tons of data, neighborhood statistics, the changes in the market, Iredell County, North Carolina, their zip code 28115. It kind of breaks down everything that they need to know and puts it in a little property report. You will find that some sellers love things like this, and you will find that some sellers could care less and they just want you to do that work and they trust you completely. This is a tool that really helps me focus in on price. They use so much data, this program uses so much data that I have found the range, especially in the current estimated value that it gives, is much more in line with market value than the tax record estimated value, definitely more accurate than the Zillow, Zestimates and all of those things. But I have found the RPR to be most in line to our market. So this number is a number that I like to use and go off of from there. All right. Now I have been talking a lot. Before I keep going, does anyone have any questions about anything I've mentioned so far? You can type it in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask a question, but I just talk and talk and talk. So does anyone have a question before we keep going? Okay. That's your chance. But if you do have a question, just type it in the chat box or unmute yourself and just talk over me and I will get that answered for you. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. I should not have X'd out of this, should I? Because now it is being so slow. Let's go back, little PowerPoint. All right, here we are. So we have been talking about resources to help you. So I showed you the RPR, I showed you the SAM data. The last thing I want to mention about resources to help you is square footage. Never ever commit to a price with your sellers until you have the accurate square footage measurements. We all know that price per square foot is the biggest factor in determining value. That's one of the biggest things that appraisers use to determine value. So we want to make sure we have that accurate square footage before we have a serious nail down pricing conversation with our sellers. I personally do not like to measure homes. The Real Estate Commission says that we either have to measure them ourselves and know what we are doing, or we have to have them measured. So tax records are not reliable. That is not a reliable source of information when it comes to measurements. A lot of people measure their own listings. That is not something I like to do. So I usually contract that out. I have a guy who measures my listings for me. He usually charges between $40 and $60 based on the square footage of the home. But for that, I get a detailed floor plan. I get, room by room measurements, floor by floor measurements, and it is worth it to me to pay him to do that. So if anybody wants his contact information, I will share it with you guys, but I don't measure my own homes. I pay someone who is more knowledgeable than I am to do that. If you commit to a price before you know the accurate square footage number, you are just creating something that you have to backtrack from. Most of the time I have found that tax records are err on the side of caution when it comes to square footage measurements. So if tax records say the square footage is 2,200, more times than not, when you measure it or have it professionally measured, it's going to be higher than what tax record shows. So if I go off tax records measurement, then essentially I am leaving money on the table. And that is the last thing I want to do for my sellers. I want them to have value in every one of their square feet in their home. So I never, ever, ever commit to a price before I've had it professionally measured. If I meet with my sellers at an initial listing appointment, we talk about price naturally, and we talk about a range of value. But I just tell them, before we can nail down a price, I'm going to have your home professionally measured, because I want to get every square foot possible accounted for. And so that is such a big piece of advice I can offer, is just to make sure you have your accurate square footage before you nail down a price. Because too, it could work the opposite way. Tax records could say the house is 2,400 square feet, you have it measured, and it's 2,300 square feet. Well, if we just looked at the average price per square foot in all these counties, that's a thousands of dollar difference that you could potentially have. So if I committed to my seller and said, oh yeah, it looks like, we could list your home for $300,000. Well, I got all of that data based on a home that I thought was 25,000 square feet, 2,500, not 25,000, 2,500 square feet. So then when I find out the home is only 2,300 square feet, that's a hard conversation to have to say, I said we could list it for $300,000, but now I think we can only list it for $290,000. That's going to kind of put me like not in a good place that I want to be with my seller. So like I have at the bottom of every page, you are the expert. You need to have the information that makes you the expert and not have to backtrack. So square footage is so big. That is one of my biggest pieces of advice when it comes to pricing. When we think about factors that determine the price, so the things we have mentioned so far have been analytical. All these things that the computer does for us, the price per square foot, the average sales price, all of these numbers that it looks on paper like your home should be worth. Well, you and I both know that there is no Kelly Blue Book for houses. So with a car, I can look up and say I have a, 2020 Ford Escape, and it, has 4 doors and it has power windows and blah, 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 and it is worth this amount of money. There is not a Kelly Blue Book for houses. So a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom home is not the same as a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom home over here. They are very different. Some of these factors determine the differences in price and range. The seller goals is something that you can't see, but you have a conversation with them. So I always want to ask my sellers, do you want to sell quickly? Is there a reason you need to sell quickly? Do you want the most amount of money possible out of this house, even if that means, it doesn't sell as quick as it would in another situation? So you want to make sure that you have your seller's goals in mind. If they need to sell ASAP, then you might price it a little differently than if they want to sit on it and they actually don't need this, like they're building a new construction house and they don't really want to sell quickly. Those are conversations you have to have. Condition of home obviously is important. So this is not just the physical things, like if there are holes in the walls or holes in the floor, but condition of home to me means, how clean it is. How does it smell? Is it cluttered? And those are things that can be addressed by the seller, but those are things that will be a hindrance to buyers. And therefore a buyer is not going to think the same about the home. I'm sure we've all walked in homes with our clients that have a strong pet odor or cigarette smoke odor, or there's just stuff everywhere. And so those are things that when I speak with my sellers and speak with them about the value of their home, I want to make sure they understand that those factors play a role in how much money they will get for their home. Like it or not, a buyer is going to walk into a home that is clean and not cluttered and, no odors, and think differently than the opposite. So those are things that a seller can control, and it's an uncomfortable situation to have that conversation at times, but I think that's our responsibility. Outside factors determine price. So I know we have probably all seen beautiful pictures online and on MLS, and then you get to the home and there is a huge power line right in the backyard, or there is a driveway that looks like this that was not in the pictures, straight up and down, or straight up and down one way or the other, and you drive up and think, they didn't put that in the picture. And that happens all the time. Those things are big factors with pricing. If you are close to power lines, if you are close to a rock quarry or something that produces a lot of noise, or close to a farm, that where I am in Iredell County in the sticks, there are lots of chicken houses. I don't know if you have ever experienced the odor of a chicken house before, but that is something that matters when it comes to the location of your home. You have to take those things into consideration. The driveway issue I have found comes up a lot. Homes that are on a steep driveway, either up and down or down, whichever way the steepness is a big deterrent for buyers. And so most often you have to take that into account. And, nothing is a problem in real estate if the price is right. But if you have a beautiful home that is on a driveway that looks like this, you might not get as much money for that home as if the same home was on a beautiful flat lot. And that's just the reality of the situation. So you have to communicate that with your sellers and show them how those things factor into the value. The season and the time of year also determine your price. We all know that right now, nothing really matters for a seller. Inventory is so low that the season or what time of year it is does not matter. But in a normal market, there are times of the year that are slower, and there are times of the year that are quicker when it comes to selling your home. Last year, I put my personal home on the market the week of Thanksgiving. Was that a good time to put my home for sale? Absolutely not. But I had already purchased or gone under contract on a new home, and it is what it is. So I ended up selling my home in, I think it closed in March. I listed, so I closed in March. In June, I listed one of my neighbor's homes who had less square footage than me. Their home was not as nice as mine, and it sold for about $15,000 more than mine did. It is what it is, though. I needed to sell when I did. I understand that the real estate market is dynamic and it is ever changing. But in an ideal world, if I had waited till the spring or the summer, when inventory was so low, I probably would have gotten a lot more for my home. I understand that. Sellers sometimes do not. They do not understand that their neighbor sold 6 months ago and got a certain price, or after they closed, another neighbor sold in the future and got much higher. And so we need to communicate with our sellers that there are many variables that determine the price. Always the amount of competition is a factor. How many homes are available right now? We are seeing that clearer than ever. There is not a lot available. And so there is not a lot of competition. Basically, a seller can get whatever they want to a degree because there's not competition right now. So that's not always the case, but that's something you have to think about with prices. And then to the same note, is it a buyer's market? Is it a seller's market? Those things determine the price of your property. The most important thing is going to be the recent sales close to the property. So the comps that we find from doing all of those comp valuations, those really are your best indicator of what a house is going to sell for. Those are what appraisers are going to use. For the most part, if you're looking at neighborhood houses, they're going to be built close to the same time. They're going to have similar features internally and externally. So recent sales that are close by are really your number one factor when you determine price. Has anybody thought of any questions or concerns or issues before we keep going? Okay, well, I will just keep running my mouth then. I have a couple more slides, but I will just keep talking. So next, we're going to talk about strategy. When people price properties, there are a couple different strategies. And honestly, I have used the ones that I put on my slide are two strategies that I use most often. So the first one is called charm pricing. I don't know where that came from necessarily, but it is used in more places than just real estate. So it's kind of the power of the 99. When you are at the grocery store and you see cereal that is $2.99 versus cereal that is $3, you want to get the $2.99 cereal because it is $2.99. And that, to you in your brain, or to me in my brain, most people in their brains, shows you're getting a deal. So a lot of people like to price using charm pricing. If their home is worth $250,000, they would rather list it for $250,000 or $49,900,000, just to make the impression that the buyer is getting a deal. If they see a 249 900 versus a 250, you know, logically that's the same thing, but buyers associate the power of the 99, as they call it, with getting a deal or some kind of bargain or sale. So, you know, I don't know the science behind that. I have used that strategy before. Um, whether it is works, doesn't work, I don't know. I do know personally though, if I'm on Amazon and I see something that is, you know, $5.99 versus $6, but even if I have to pay shipping on the $5.99, the base price, the $5.99 is cheaper, and that in my brain makes me think I am getting a deal, which again is silly, but it works. So the strategy I like to use most often, though, is when you price to hit multiple ranges. An example of this is, so we all know that buyers usually start on the internet. They're not just going to call their realtor, call a real estate agent and say, hey, put me on a search. I have no idea what I want. Just put me on a search. More often than not, a buyer has gone to Zillow, Realtor.com, Redfin, driven around. You know, they kind of know what they're looking for. They kind of know what's available before they loop you in. On those websites, a buyer is going to search by price points. More often than not, they search in ranges of 10s or 50s. And so what I mean by that is they're going to search 180 to 250, you know, 180 to 280 or 180 to 220. So they're going to search in ranges of $10,000. Also, they might search in ranges of $50,000. So they might search, you know, 300 to 350, or even $100,000, a 300,000 to 400,000. So if I know that the value of my listing is close to a new range. So, you know, let's say I am going to list a home, and on paper, it looks like the home should be listed at 248. Like that's what 248 is, kind of what it looks like to me on paper. I am going to suggest to my sellers that we do not list at 248, but we list at 250, because that is going to show up to buyers who are looking from 2 to 250. It's going to show up to buyers who are looking from 250 to 300. But if I listed at 248 and a buyer starts searching at 250, my listing is not going to show up. They're not even going to see it. And that's a close enough range where I'm going to make sure, you know, I'm not overpricing the property by $10,000, but I am making sure that it shows up to a buyer on the internet. So, you know, again, if you are not close to a stair step in the range, like if your value is 317, I'm not going to suggest we list at, you know, 300,000 or 350,000, because that's too far away. Like 317, if that's your value, then that's your value. But if you are close to stair stepping to another range, it's always good to be in the middle. So then you show up the most. It's kind of just making sure that your property is going to show up when people are searching lower, higher, in between, you are going to show up. So those are just a couple of strategies that you want to think about with your sellers. A lot of sellers have their own superstitions when it comes to prices or numbers. And so I have had sellers tell me before, like Asian cultures. In the Asian culture, the number 8 is very powerful. 8 is supposed to be lucky. I don't know if it's all Asian cultures, but Chinese culture especially. So I have had a client before that said, I don't care what we listed at, it needs to have an 8 in the price. And unfortunately, we were not at a place, like it wasn't near a 18 or 28 or one of those things. So we listed at, I think it was think it was like 156 800, like we just put an 800 on the end, so he got his 8. So sometimes you have to appease your sellers. If they are superstitious or have a lucky number, you can always work that in. But charm pricing, which is the power of the 99, and then range pricing are two strategies that can be helpful to you when you think about pricing a home. My last slide, I know you are probably ready for me to be done talking. So my last slide are just some general things that you want to think about and remember as you start to price. I'm gonna skip to the bottom of this first, like I have on every one. You are the expert, and you need to remember that, and you need to treat yourself that way. So a seller called you for a reason, and you need to be confident with what you bring to the table. You need to do your research, do your due diligence, make sure you're familiar with the market, make sure you're familiar with the neighborhood, and then you become the expert. A seller is much more willing to put their trust fully in you if you know what you're talking about. If you're confident, and the only way to get confidence is to educate yourself. So if you have never listed a home before and never priced a home before versus you've listed in 100 homes, you still have the same resources available. You still can use the data and create the best listing price based on the data and based on some of those outside factors. And it doesn't matter how many houses you have listed or how many houses or sellers you have worked with before. So just remember, the data is there to make you the expert. One of the other things, like you have a seller that says, well, my house is 4-bedroom, 3-bath, and my friend down the street listed her 4-bedroom and 3-bath home last month and got $400,000 for it, so I want $400,000. It doesn't work like that. Every house is different. Every house has factors that add value or take away value. So things like age of systems, the HVAC system, the water heater, the roof. If you live in the sticks like me, the septic system, the well, how old are these things? When were they last replaced? Things like that are big factors when it comes to value. And those are things that a buyer wants to know. They want to know, if I buy this home and I have to replace the HVAC system next year because the HVAC system is 18 years old, then, that's going to affect the price that I'm willing to pay. That's going to affect the value. So just because there was a 4-bed, 2-bath home down the street that sold for one price, yours might not be the same. Yours might be in better condition. Yours might be in worse condition. Yours might, yours might have a pool where theirs did not have a pool. Yours might have a fenced in backyard where theirs did not, or vice versa. So there are these things that, there's just you can't open a book and say, okay, here's a listing and it fits this, and this is what I should list it for. That would be nice and easy and make all of our lives a lot easier, and probably make realtors and appraisers not fight so much, but unfortunately that's not the way it works. So just keep that in mind. One thing that we have not talked about, and I'm going to try to wrap on up with, is a bidding war. So I personally hate bidding wars. I hate them on the listing side and on the buyer side. It just is, they're just not my favorite. Some sellers want a bidding war. They want their home to spark so much interest that people are just your sellers understand is that the way that you price a home determines, determines the type of offers you're going to get in, and also determines if you're going to have bidding wars with offers that are actually good offers or qualified buyers. If you price your home correctly, you might have more offers that come in and could be selective on, like, not just the price. And we all know this as listing agents. Sometimes the highest price is not the best offer. You have to think about the type of financing. You have to think about due diligence money and earnest money. You have to think about, if they have to sell a house, if there's conditions with the offer. So, I've just found that with my sellers, I communicate before we even list the house. If we list it, we could get multiple offers in. It could be a bidding war, and kind of just set their expectations. So it's not right, wrong, indifferent to create a situation where you want to get multiple offers in. It can just create some different challenges. So I just like to have those conversations with my sellers. And then, such a big point is that data speaks louder than emotions. So I've spent most of this time talking to you about data and where to get all this information, because ultimately the people, our clients, have lived in these homes. They are attached to these homes. They are emotional. They think their home is the best home in all of the world for the most part. And so it's hard to sometimes make a seller see that because they think their home is worth $300,000, it might only be worth $280,000. Sales, price per square foot, all these things that we've talked about earlier. It's easier to present that information to a seller in a way that doesn't hurt their feelings. So, we all think our house is the best, but you really have to come from data, and you have to come from knowing the market, knowing what, how much value does a fence add? We're not appraisers. To be an appraiser, you have to go to lots and lots and lots of school and do lots and lots and lots of work. And we are not a certified appraiser, but we should have an idea of, this house has a fenced-in backyard and it sold for this much. This was a similar house that did not have a fenced-in backyard and it sold for this much. So that data tells me that a fenced-in backyard might bring $5,000 worth of value, or, whatever amount of value to the table. That's your job, to find houses that have different variables so you can guide your sellers and show them what their house has, how it ranks to other houses available. Then I think I've said this before. I keep saying the most important. Scratch all that. This is the most important. If you do not know something, I mentioned this at the beginning, sellers and buyers do not forget what we say. So with price especially, do not let it come out of your mouth unless you are certain. Don't tell a seller in Cabarrus County that the average price per square foot is $154 when we just looked and saw it was $122. Because then they're not going to forget that. They're going to know their square footage. They're going to start calculating that, and they will hold your feet to the fire on what you said. It is perfectly fine not to know everything. Who knows everything? None of us do. But it is our job to make sure what we speak to our clients is accurate. And so, if you don't know something, don't spout off something to make yourself sound like you do. With pricing, that is so, so, so important. You cannot come back from, you obviously can, but it is hard to come back from saying something and having to backtrack and telling your seller, well, actually, I didn't mean that your house was worth $300,000. Actually, it's really only worth $270,000. That is a tough pill to swallow. And in this world that we live in, where our market is super saturated with real estate agents, I think everybody we know probably knows 3 or 4 real estate agents. So if you are not going to be true with them and you are going to say something and then backtrack on it, I can guarantee you there is another real estate agent out there who will just scoop that up. And that is not right. But this market is definitely saturated with real estate agents. So just know your stuff, take some time to know the data, study the data. And if there is a particular neighborhood that you work in a lot or that you want to work in a lot, make that your job. Know off the tip of your tongue days on market for that neighborhood. Know off the tip of your tongue the average square price per square foot, the list to close price. Like that's your job, is to study those things and be knowledgeable of it. And people don't forget that. People don't forget that you would be able to tell them that data. And so really, if we have spare time, free time, just dive into that. I personally love numbers. I like the data part of real estate. I think that's why I'm drawn to sellers and listings in general, but make that your job and just be knowledgeable of it. And the good thing is all of these resources are here for us. We just have to make sure that we are taking advantage of them. So that is kind of my biggest thing to remember on pricing. So now, please, somebody have some kind of question. Let me get out of here and get back to Zoom. So does anybody, oh, it looks like we have a chat question. No. Okay. Does anyone have any comments or questions or anything they would like to share with the group?
Hey, Sarah.
Yes.
It's Laura. Okay, so here's my question, and this is what I struggle with because I seem to be getting these houses that are not in cookie cutter situations where you can just, get comps and that are pretty easy.
Right.
They're usually kind of out and about and are uniquely made and have land added to them and things like that. So what is your suggestion as far as like you have that unique house that how far out of a radius do you go usually, or you cannot find this custom house that was built, what is your strategy on that?
That is a great question, Laura. And I know that depending on where you work, that might be something that is more the rule versus the exception. If you work in certain markets where it's cookie cutter neighborhood, you might not deal with that a lot. But if you are working in other markets, that's a good question. I tend to first try to look as far out as I can. So, even a 10-mile radius of the home, and go back 2 or 3 years in sales and see if I can find anything close to that house as a comp. Usually if you set your parameters far away, like 10-mile radius or 2 years ago close date, you can find something. For homes though that I can't find a good comp, or there are some factors like you said where it's the condition is hard to find another home in that condition. I honestly go to those SAM reports, and so I go to the county, I go to the zip code, and I find average price per square foot for that zip code. And that data is not going to be as strong as when I can go into the RPR and get a more detailed valuation, but it at least shows me. So, Rowan County, if I'm in China Grove, I could type in China Grove price per square foot, and that gives me a starting block. So
Right.
Then I just search other homes in China Grove and look at their price per square foot and try to see that home compared to my home, what was better, what was worse condition wise. And it is a lot harder when you have to go off more of your knowledge. And that part, you really have to just go off your history and what you know of homes. Honestly,
Right.
I have had a house seller before that like you just said, I went to them. I said, this is all the data I have found. This is where I think we should price your home based on the data that I have found. However, that data is not cookie cutter, crystal clear. So I gave them the option of, if you would like to get an appraisal, you are more than welcome to. I did not offer to pay for the appraisal for that seller, but I said, if this is, this is where I think we should be. I have information that supports this price. However, if you would like to get a formal appraisal, that is perfectly fine. So that seller did get an appraisal. And honestly, we were very close with what I came up with and what the appraiser came up with. But sometimes, a seller, you just have to be truthful with them and say, this is a hard house to comp. This is what I found. But, worst case scenario is, if you want an appraisal before we list it, to make sure we get the most for your value for your, for you, then that sometimes is an option that you can present to your sellers.
Got it. Yeah, because I looked on RPR and they gave 1 star, so it was just like, I looked at everything and anyway, thank you.
You're welcome. It is hard. And when it says 1 star, it's like, well, that's not very encouraging.
Yeah, your confidence rate goes down really, really when you've gone out 10 miles and that has 1 star, and then of course the seller wants to get every penny they can for their house, and you have nothing to back it up with. So
exactly, that is hard. When you have a house that does not have a lot of comps, you're working hard to get the value with that one. And again, they see, they may see the estimate, or they may see, another number that is not accurate to the actual value. But just as many places as you can get data from, as many comps as you can find that are close enough, and sometimes you have to, like I had one in China Grove last year. There was nothing. There was not another house in China Grove that looked like my list. Nothing. And so I had to go to Mooresville. I went to Salisbury, had to extend. But then when I presented that information to my seller, I said, Rowan County price per square foot is $97 a price per square foot. Iredell County, this Mooresville house is $117. So yes, this is a similar home, but it's a $117 price per square foot, and Rowan County is a $97. So just because this home looks like yours and it's in Mooresville does not mean that your home is going to be the same value as that. So just as much as you can find to give to a seller, the better.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm glad I know I'm not the only one.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Does anyone else have a question?
Yes, Sarah. This is Sabine. For the price per square foot, do you always use the average, or sometimes do you use the median?
That's a good question too. I usually use the average, honestly, and I try to, especially with the SAM reports, I try to make it as focused as I can. So like up at the top of the SAM reports, you can say if it's a resale, new construction, traditional sale, 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom, how many bathrooms. Even if you keep going, it has like a square footage range. And so once I do all of those factors, I usually can get a better idea, a closer relation. So I usually do the average, and with matrix too, I know it gives you the option of the median and average. But I stick to average, and I think of average, like it says, as the average. So if I go into a home that is immaculate, has a brand new HVAC, a brand new hot water heater, a newer roof, no issues, new flooring, new paint, that home to me is above average. So when I'm looking at price per square foot, if there's a range, that house, I'm going to be at the top end of the range. On the other turn, if I walk into a house that is going to need some repairs, has lots of tasks for the new buyer to do, is in less than average condition, I'm looking at the bottom end of the range. And so, you know, ranges sometimes can be good because no house is going to be the same. And that's really where the subjective part of real estate comes in. And we have to go on our past experiences and, you know, what other houses have sold for. But that's why you can't look at a house on paper and say, yes, seller, your house is worth $280,000. You physically have to go there and say, and look around and see, well, what end of the range are we on? And even with the RPR, you know, if this house is immaculate, perfect, brand new, the best house ever, we're going to be at the top end of that range on RPR. If there's lots of projects to do and lots of work and systems have to be replaced, we're at the bottom end of that range. So yeah, the ranges can be a good thing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have a question?
Sarah, thank you so much for doing this for us today. We really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. I struggle with this Zoom stuff, as y'all can tell. So, you know, excuse me just talking and talking and talking. And when we get back to in-person classes, I'm going to be excited about it. But I appreciate all you guys for showing up. And if you think of any questions, just feel free to shoot me an email. Also, if you want, like I mentioned, I have a square footage guy that I use to measure all of my properties. If you want his information, just let me know and I will send over any resources I have. I will always be happy to share. So you can just send me an email if you have any questions. All right, well, I think we are done. So y'all can have the last 45 minutes just to have free time since it was supposed to be 10 to 12. But again, I appreciate you guys coming. And if you have any questions, just let me know.
Thanks, Sarah.
Bye. Thank y'all.